Well, good morning to all of you. It's great to be in the house of the Lord on a beautiful day, and it's great to minister through social media. And so you're all welcome this morning. My message today is wholly different. I'm using Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 through 5, and Revelation chapter 4, verses 8 through 11 as the basis for my thoughts today. And I might mention that I'm going to be using probably several different Bible versions. So keep that in mind, especially if you're taking notes, because and I'll identify them as I go along so that if you want to check them out, you can do that. So here we go, wholly different. John Hanning Speck stands on the river edge and stares at the wall of water. He's dedicated the better part of 1858 to getting to where he's at. For weeks, he and his party splashed and slashed through African brush and forded deep rivers. Natives bearing iron-headed spears were pursuing them. Crocodiles kept an eye on them. But finally, after miles of jungle marching and grass plotting, they found the falls. Only a Britisher could stand so clearly and understate the sight. He says, "We were well rewarded." He wrote that in his journal. The roar of the waters, thousands of passenger fish leaping at the falls with all their might. The Wasaga and the Waganda fishermen coming out in boats and taking post on all rocks with rod and hook. Hippopotamus and crocodiles lying sleepily in the water made in all an interesting a picture as anyone would want to see. Speck could not leave. He sketched the sight over and over. He dedicated an entire day to simply staring at the majesty of the falls at the Upper Nile. Not hard to understand why. I was there, by the way, and saw those falls, and it's just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. And for him, there was no region in England that boasted any such sight. Rarely do eyes fall on such a hitherto unseen image. Speck did, and he was stunned by what he saw. And now, 14 years later, halfway around the globe, Frederick Dellenbaugh was equally impressed. He was only 18 when he joined Major Powell on his pioneering river voyage through the Grand Canyon. Led by the one-armed Powell, the explorers floated on leaky boats and faced high waters. It's a wonder that they even survived. It's every bit of such a wonder what they saw. Dellenbaugh described the scene. He says, "My back being towards the fall, I couldn't see it. Nearer and nearer came the angry tumult. The major shouted, 'Backwater,' and there was a sudden dropping away of all support. And then the mighty waters smote us. The boat rose to them well, but we were flying at 25 miles an hour, and at every leap the breakers rolled over us. 'Bail,' shouted the major, 'bail for your lives.' And we dropped the oars to bail, though bailing was almost useless. The boat rolled and pitched like a ship in a tornado. Canopies of foam poured over gigantic black boulders, first on one side, then on the other. If you'll take a watch and count by it 90 seconds, you'll probably have about the time we were in this chaos, though it seemed much longer to me. and then we were through. Young Dellenbaugh knew rapids. Rivers and raging water were not new to him. But something about this river was. The sudden immensity, the stark intensity, something stole the oarman's breath. He knew rapids, but nothing like this. Speck was speechless. Dellenbaugh, drenched and awestruck. And Isaiah, face first on the temple floor, arms crossed above his head, muffled voice crying for mercy. Like the explorers, he's just seen the unseen. But unlike the explorers, he's seen more than creation. He's seen the Creator. He's seen God. This is 7.5 centuries before Christ. Isaiah was an ancient version, I guess I can use that term, of Israel's Senate chaplain or court priest. His family was aristocratic. His Hebrew was impeccable. He was polished, professional, and successful. But the day that he saw God, only one response seemed appropriate. Woe is me, for I am ruined. What caused such a confession? What stirred such a reply? The answer is found in the thrice repeated words of the seraphim. Holy, holy, holy. Seraphim stood above him. We read this. Each having 6 wings, with 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, with 2 he flew. And one called out to the other and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out, while the temple was filling with smoke. And then I said, Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Isaiah chapter 6, verses 2 and 5. That's from the New American Standard Bible. On one occasion, seraphim appeared in Scripture. They innocently trilogized the word. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. That's in the New International Version. Repetition in Hebrew performs the work of our highlighter. There's a tool of emphasis here. God proclaims the 6-winged angels. They say, he's not holy. They say he is holy, holy, holy. What other attributes receive such enforcement? No verse describes God as wise, 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 or strong, strong, strong. Only as holy, holy, holy. See, God's holiness commands headline attention. The adjective qualifies his name more than all of the others combined. The first and final songs of the Bible magnify the holiness of God. Having crossed the Red Sea, Moses and the Israelites sang, Who among the gods is like you, Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders? Exodus chapter 15, verse 11, in the New International Version. In Revelation, those who had been victorious over the beast sang, Who will not fear you, O Lord, and bring glory to your name? For you alone are holy. Again, in the New International Version, chapter 15, verse 4. The Hebrew word for holy is gadosh, which means cut off or separate. Holiness speaks of the otherness of God, his total uniqueness. Everything about God is different from the world that he has created, that he has made. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about, a paper airplane. We've all, well, us boys anyway, maybe some of you girls made those paper airplanes. Yeah. That's kind of what you are to a paper airplane, God is to you. If you take a sheet of paper and you make one, we all can do that. And then contrast yourself with your creation. Why don't you challenge that airplane to a spelling contest? Who will win? Dare it to race you around the block. Who's faster? Invite the airplane to a one-on-one basketball. Who'll dominate the court? Maybe. Well, you know who's going to win in those kind of situations. This thing that you created has no brain, no pulse. It exists only because you formed it and flies only when someone throws it. Now, if you multiply the contrast between you and the paper airplane by infinity, and you'll begin to catch a glimpse of the disparity between God and us. To what can we compare God? Who in the skies is comparable to the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty is like the Lord? Psalms 89 verse 6 in the New Amplified Standard. To whom will you then liken God? Or what likeness will you compare with God? Isaiah chapter 40, verse 18, in the New American Standard Bible. Even God asks, to whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Isaiah chapter 40, verse 25, in the New Living Translation. And if his question here needed an answer, he gives one. Listen to what he says in Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 through 11 in the New Living Testament. He says, I am God, I alone. I am God, and there is no one else like me. Only I can tell you what's going to happen even before it happens. Everything I plan will come to pass, for I do whatever I wish. I will call a swift bird of prey from the east, a leader from a distant land who will come and do my bidding. I have said I would do it, and I will. That's God talking. Any pursuit of God's counterpart is vain. Any search of godlike persons or position on earth is futile. No one and nothing compares with him. No one advises him. He doesn't have a wife like I do. Pretty good God you are. No one helps him. It's God who executes judgment, putting one down and lifting up another. Psalm 75, verse 7, in the English Standard Version. You and I may have power, but I want to tell you, God is power. We may be a lightning bug, but he's lightning himself. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 20, in the New International Version, it says, wisdom and power are his. So consider the universe around us. Unlike the potter who takes something and reshapes it, God took nothing and created something. God created everything that exists, everything. By his divine choice. He didn't rely on any material that was pre-existent or co-eternal. Prior to creation, the universe was not a dark space. The universe didn't exist. And we know from the scriptures that God created the darkness. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, in the New Living Translation, it says, I am the one who creates light and makes the darkness. John proclaimed, you created everything, and it's for your pleasure that they exist and were created. Revelation chapter 4, verse 11. Again, in the New Living Translation. So if we trace the universe back to God's power and follow his power upstream to his wisdom, God's omnipotence covers his whole realm of infinite knowledge, of his rule with infinite strength. Job chapter 9, verse 4 in the King James Version says, he is wise in heart and mighty in strength. And again in chapter 36, verse 5 in Job, he says, he's mighty in strength and wisdom. His power is not capricious or careless. Quite the contrary. His wisdom manages and equals his strength. Paul announced in Romans chapter 11, verse 33 in the New International Version, and he says, oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. His knowledge about you and me is as complete as his knowledge about the universe. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet I had none of them. Psalm 139, verse 4 in the Contemporary English Version. The veils that block your vision and mine They don't block God's unspoken words that are uttered. Unveiled thoughts are as if proclaimed. Unoccurred moments are as if they were history. He knows the future, the past, the hidden, the untold. Nothing is concealed from God, even when you think you have it concealed. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present. King David marveled in the New American Standard, Psalm 139, verse 7. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? God reminds us that he's everywhere, both near and far, in heaven and on earth. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 23 and 24 in the Contemporary English Version. We see the holy otherness of God. In Isaiah's encounter, those who see him regard him most highly. He's so holy that sinless, think about that sinless seraphim cannot look at the Lord. They cover their faces with their wings. And oddly enough, they cover their feet. I always thought that was strange, why they would do that. In Hebrew, the word feet and the word for gentilia are the same. Forgive the thought, but the confession of the angels is they are absolutely impotent in the presence of God. And Isaiah could relate. When he sees the holiness of God, Isaiah doesn't boast or swagger, takes no notes, plans no sermon series, launches no seminar tours. Instead, he falls on his face and begs for mercy. Woe is me, for I'm ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 5 in the New American Standard. The God-given version was not about Isaiah, but about God and God's glory. And Isaiah gets the point. It's not about me. It's all about him. He finds humility, not through seeking it, but through seeking him. One glimpse, and the prophet claims citizenship among the infected and the diseased. He cries out that he's unclean, a term that was used for people with leprosy. God's holiness silences human boasting. And God's mercy makes us holy. Look what happens next. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin forgiven. New American Standard. in verses 6 and 7. Isaiah makes no request. He asks for no grace. He just assumed that was impossible. But God, who is quick to pardon and is full of mercy, purges Isaiah of his sin and redirects his life. And then God solicits a spokesman. Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Verse 8 in the New American Standard. Immediately, Isaiah's heart and hand, they shoot skyward. Here I am, send me. After a glimpse of God's holiness, Isaiah had to speak, as if he had found the source of the river, as if he had ridden the rage of the canyon. It's as if he had seen what Moses had seen, God himself. It was a glimpse, just a glimpse of God, but a glimpse of God nonetheless. And because of that glimpse, he was wholly different. Wholly different as a result. And we can be wholly different right along with Isaiah. We just need to get a good glimpse of God. And then we can proclaim like the seraphim, holy, holy, holy. Father, thank you for your word this morning. A different kind of word, Lord, but sometimes we need to look at things a little differently. Bless us, encourage us today, Father, in Jesus' name.